In my previous video, I talked about the basic modules and controls in Chromaphone, the mallet module, the resonators, and the knobs within each of those. Now I'm going to talk about the controls that refine those elements, specifically the keyboard and velocity buttons underneath the knobs. I'll also talk a little bit about the pitch envelope. Before I get into all of that, let me just explain why these are important. Real instruments have constant variations in their sounds. For example, if you pluck a guitar string softly and then heavily, you hear a difference not only in volume, but also in timbre and in tuning. So the controls that I'll be talking about can give you this variation and detail in sound. Underneath many of these knobs on Chromaphone, you'll see some very small buttons, key and VEL. Key stands for keyboard and VEL for velocity. These are our modulation controls. Let's look at this one underneath the decay knob as an example. If you click on the key button and move your mouse down, you'll see that a circle starts to appear. On one side is darker and on the other side lighter. That progression from dark to light is associated in this case with the progression of the keyboard. As I play notes progressively from low to high, you'll hear the decay shorten. This behavior is much like a real stringed instrument, in which the high notes would have a shorter decay time than the low ones. I can reverse this progression by clicking and dragging the mouse upward. So the circle goes from light to dark now, and again if I play the low to high notes, the decay actually gets longer as I go up the keyboard. I can do something similar with velocity instead of the key button. Let's go over to the mallet module and look at the stiffness knob. Right now, there's no change in the stiffness of the mallet as I play with more velocity. I have modulated the volume so that it does increase with greater velocity, but the stiffness stays the same. So now I'm going to modulate the stiffness with a velocity range. So now as I play the notes softly then loudly, the stiffness increases with a higher velocity. And again, I can reverse this progression if I want to. So anywhere you have these modulation controls, you can alter the sound through the progression on your keyboard or the velocity with which you're playing. Let's look at the pitch controls on the resonator. The key slider affects the ratio of intervals to keys. If it's 1-to-1, each key plays a semitone. You can change that ratio so that more or less of an interval of a semitone is assigned to a key. If you have something like a thumping box, you may not want the pitch to change. So in that case, you can drag this down to a smaller ratio. So now that the pitch doesn't change very much. The pitch envelope basically affects detuning. The level slider here affects the amount of detuning that occurs and whether the pitch starts above or below its normal level. So I'm going to slide it up. You can't really hear this until you've adjusted the rate slider. The rate affects how quickly the note reaches its normal pitch. slide the level slider the other way and it'll go up. The velocity slider lets you have more or less detuning according to velocity, so the harder you press, the more the note detunes. So, with the pitch controls and the velocity and key modulations, you can really do quite a lot to refine the sound of an instrument.